Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us for our fourth annual Frugal Innovations in Global Health Conference. This is the second day of a two-day conference this year, and this year's theme is focused on clean water and sanitation. The conference is co-sponsored by the Loyola Parkinson School of Health Science and Public Health, India Development, Rush University, as well as the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Public Health program. That's actually where I serve as the assistant global health there. My name is Allison Lofthouse. Thank you again for joining us. Next, please. We had a fantastic day yesterday of speakers, and with us today, we have wonderful speakers as well. We have Ms. Harkness, the Executive Director of Current. Some of you may have her profiled in Chicago Crane's business magazine this week. Also with us is Dr. Peters of Rapid Radicals Technology, and one of our program partners, Ms. Shilpa Alva from Surge for Water, which is a Chicago-based organization, but she's actually joining us from Dubai. So thank you to our speakers for taking the time to join us. Slide, please. So why do frugal innovations in healthcare? Well, we know that frugal technologies modify how people seek and use health services. Frugal innovations are affordable, they increase efficiency, and they tend to be well-positioned to be scaled up. Next slide, please. So just a couple of facts or stats from the to get us grounded. Over 2 billion people lack safe drinking water. Over 3 billion people lack safely managed sanitation services. Less than 1% of the water on Earth is usable and available fresh water. There are rapid changes happening with our surface water bodies. And then we have the whole issue of vector-borne diseases and the relation to water. Next slide, please. So contaminated water and poor sanitation leads to a variety of illnesses, one of them being diarrheal disease, which is a really significant contributor to death in the under 5 population. In healthcare facilities, lack of adequate water and sanitation increases the risk of infection. And then poor handling of wastewater leads to contamination of drinking water. And then we also have the issue of vector-borne illnesses and the relationship with water. As you can see, clean water is an important to the livelihoods of every being on Earth. Next slide, please. Housekeeping things, we do Zoom live transcript enabled. If you wish to turn it off, simply click on the transcript icon and then click hide subtitle, and then that will disappear. We do encourage questions from the audience. Please just use the chat function. We will be monitoring the questions, and we will get to them during the panel session or when there's brief moments for question and answer. So please submit your questions to the chat. I'd like to thank the speakers for joining us, all of you for spending your Friday morning, afternoon, evening with our moderator, who I'm going to take a second to briefly introduce. So Mr. Jerome McDonald, he's our moderator again for today. And if you've listened to a lot of public radio in Chicago, you know his voice. He hosted the Global Affairs program World for 25 years, and over the years has interviewed world leaders and influential people, including Jimmy Carter, Kofi Annan, Condoleezza Dalai Lama. These long activism features people who've started healthcare, education, and community development organizations around the globe. So doing work very similar to the people who are in our Frugal Innovations Conference. Over the years, he's won numerous awards, too many awards in broadcasting and journalism to name. So we are very lucky to have him here with us again today. Jerome, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Allison, and it's good to be here today again. And like I said yesterday, I think the Frugal Innovations Conference is a wonderful thing because it expands our minds and makes us think of possibilities, about solutions, about ideas that we maybe don't come in contact with at all times, and hopefully a sense of wonder too, a real sense of wonder and joy that we can make a difference and really impact people's health in a positive way. And certainly around water, that's true. And yesterday we heard from such a nice panel of people, and it was really more about the impacts of not having clean water and some rural solutions. Today we're going to have a more slightly urban focus and talk about other realms that really impact everyone in the world when it comes to clean water, and that's science. Certainly, science has a huge, huge influence. Municipalities have a huge influence, philanthropy, businesses, all these people have a huge influence on our clean water future. And we're going to get started today with someone who comes out of the science realm. And Paige Peters is a PhD, and she's the founder of the CTO and CTO of Radicals Technology. And Paige founded Rapid Radicals in 2016 to commercialize her graduate research at Marquette University on the development of a decentralized, high-rate advanced water treatment process to eliminate combined sanitary and sewer overflows and basement backups during intense storms. So these are the overflows we all see in Lake Michigan here in Chicago. When we get the big storms, we dump the poop water into the lake, and the same thing happens in Milwaukee and all around the Great Lakes to an incredible extent. And Paige is working on a system and piloting a system that would clean that water up before we put it back in the lake and clean it faster so that we can deal with these surges. She's received over 1 million in small business innovation research awards from the National Science Foundation. She's participated and mentored in the National Foundation Science Foundation's I-Corps program before joining the Great Lakes Hub and teaching as an adjunct professor with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Outside the lab, Paige is a professional mentor with the do-gooder organization Engineers Without Borders and works on water supply and distribution projects in Guatemala, so has a big foot in the rural water systems as well. Thanks a lot for joining us, Paige Peters. I'm excited to hear about your program and your process and your pilot deal.
Thanks for the introduction, Jerome, and thanks for having me at the conference today. So this is anything related to water, sanitation, frugality, personally and professionally, and innovation is close to my heart. So I'm excited to get to share some more information with you guys about what we've been working on at Rapid Radicals and kind of how that ties back to the sort of the pillars of frugal innovation and generally how we take technology that is responsive to a market and a community need and translate it into, we take it from the lab rather and translate it into the market. So the presentation I've got for you guys is kind of a twofold look at how we developed the technology, how we started something in the lab, the problem, what drove it to start, and then going from there, talking a little bit more about how we listen to the market, how we let the market dictate or drive the changes that we made in the technology, and as we scaled the company. So it's a little bit of a history of how we got to where we are now. And then for the nerds in the room, I've got a little information more about the technology itself towards the end. So let's go to the next slide. So this is always our big, like, did you know that every year 850 billion gallons of untreated sewage are dumped into US lakes and rivers due to sewer overflows? And to put that into a little bit of context, that's equivalent to 170,000 Mississippi rivers filled with poop water. So it's an important distinction, it's an important statistic, an important thing to say. Jerome, you did a great job introducing the fact that this is an issue that exists around the Great Lakes. I believe Chicago had some overflows just yesterday, and it was a wet day in that whole region. So in the region of the Great Lakes, sewer overflows exist all over the country and really all over the world. So I'm currently coming to you from the Netherlands. It's also a problem in the EU. And the reality of sewer overflows and the problem that they present are threefold. You've got your issues with the environmental health that it impacts, the economic health. So right now there's a huge challenge with sewer overflows in the whole of the UK and how that's impacting the swimming days, which, as you can imagine, in the UK, there's not a whole lot of swimming days. So when you get those swimming days and you have beach closures due to sewer overflows, due to contamination, that's a huge issue. And then, of course, the public health and the social component of that. So a lot of drinking water sources come from the same places that overflows can occur in. And as we learn more about the things that are in our water and how we can treat them, how we can remove them, understanding what that closed loop looks like, where water comes from, how water gets treated, where it goes, and then where it gets pulled from to be treated again for consumption. But the reality is that when we're talking about water and how as humans we interact with water, whether it's in a rural or an urban situation, it's important to understand all these different components. So I'm going to start here a little bit talking again about the problem, but understanding when, you know, the source of our project and of rapid radicals, we can go to the next slide, it was really started close to home. So in July of 2010, Milwaukee saw one of its worst storms ever. We had about 9 inches of rainfall in an extremely short period of time, and it caused over 2 billion gallons of sewage to be released into our lakes, our rivers in Lake Michigan. And what also happened at the time was my academic advisor, Dr. Dan Zittimer at Marquette University, experienced 6 inches of contaminated water flooded in his basement. And at that moment, he had this realization that there's got to be some engineering solution to solve this problem. So now we've got this problem, someone who's being directly affected by it, and then someone who comes up with the solution. And it was around that time, after these years of storm events, and we had back-to-back 500-year storm events in 2010 and 2011, that this Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District had announced their goal for zero sewer overflows and basement backups by 2035, which is quickly approaching. So between what had occurred in 2010 and the district's announcement to meet this zero sewer overflows and basement backups goal, we started working with the district in 2015 as part of my master's research. So I returned to Marquette University to work on this project that was developing this high rate wastewater treatment system to essentially begin working on solving the problem of sewer overflows. And quickly, the idea was, if we can combine these rapid solids or these rapid treatment systems, we can treat water to Clean Water Act permit requirements in less than 30 minutes, which gives us a really small footprint. It's about 20 times faster than conventional treatment. And it means that we can then put this system at the location where these overflow events occur. So that was the original idea. And we got to work in the lab coming up with something that that would ultimately meet that need. So one of the first things to understand in all that was, what are we currently doing? So we can go to the next slide. And we started understanding that the current solution, which is such a key, like, what's our competition? What are people doing now? What are people currently spending money on? A key piece of that, that's a key piece of understanding how we then develop technology going forward. So we know that the current solution in a lot of different places and a lot of different utilities is to build storage. So let's store all that water, that it starts raining, that water gets into our system. We've got old pipes that are taking in all that water from the groundwater, and we've got combined pipes that are meant to take in the stormwater and sewage. But generally, our systems are not designed necessarily to take in that much water. So we started building these storage systems. Chicago's got the TARP system, Milwaukee has the deep tunnel. Lots of places are building tunnels and building underground storage tanks to tank in that water. But the reality is that in most places where these huge multi-billion-dollar investments have been made in storage, there's still overflows that occur because we've got increasing pressure from population increases, from aging infrastructure, and as the effects of climate change become more and more felt, especially in our infrastructure. So we've got this understanding of what's currently going on. We can go to the next slide. And that gets us to what I mentioned before, this idea of treating water in a small footprint at the location where these overflow events occur. So briefly, our idea was that we can take some existing solutions, existing high rate treatment technologies. Again, all we want to do is make this treatment happen very quickly so that we can keep it in a small footprint and make it feasible to implement out in space-constrained urban environments at the location where these overflow events occur. So our thought was to combine rapid solids removal, take down all those solids that we've been able to remove well, and lots of technologies to do that, and combine that with an oxidation process that can also happen very quickly. but there's a compatibility to those two technologies being combined that needs to be considered for cost, for space, and for treatment. I'll get to that in a little bit. But our broad idea, and we go to the next slide, is to look at, from a whole sewer service area, how many, based on historic overflow data, based on population, based on land use, even based on poverty index, can we identify locations where all these overflow events occur? And our goal is not to put in, for example, Milwaukee has over 150 overflow locations. And these are places that are, or locations like I'd shown on that previous slide, where the water is essentially designed to go into a waterway instead of backing up into a basement. It's the worst case scenario, is to have contaminated water back up into people's basements. So the location of these overflows is essentially designed to allow that water to go somewhere where it's not going to directly, at that moment, interact with people. And so our perspective was, let's go ahead and use that existing infrastructure. So again, we're talking about how can we not try to build all these new capital projects, but use the existing infrastructure that we have, and the way that that's designed hydraulically, and also just generally from an infrastructure standpoint, to take advantage of the data that we have, the design that it exists, and implement these small footprint, high rate treatment solutions at that locations where, again, where those overflows occur. And so this was a study that I'd done on the sewer service area in 2017. And if you kind of zoom out, we essentially, like I said, all those other factors that we took into account, historic overflow data, population, land use, rainfall, flood risk, and poverty index, to essentially identify 4 locations where if we put these systems in place and use them as drains, we could treat water to permit requirements. It could be safely returned to our rivers. We would eliminate basement backups, and we would not be adding that environmental burden on our waterways. Most of the time, overflows occur because you can't get water quickly to those centralized wastewater treatment plants that do a great job, but again, aren't necessarily designed for these 500-year storms that we keep getting. So we kind of went into it with this perspective. We had, we were started with the research. We were working with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, Chicago MWRD, Green Bay New Water, Fond du Lac Wastewater Reclamation Facility, as well as the EPA and the DNR. And we went into this project with that support. It's kind of like our market base, to say there is an interest from the market, from our potential customers. So we've got this market need that we're starting to meet with the technology. And we can go to the next slide. But we really had to dig in further to truly understand, is this technology really meeting a need? Is this technology something that, the last thing that we would want, and this is often the challenge when we talk about technology transfer and taking innovation from the lab and bring it to the market, is that as scientists and as engineers, we can build the absolute coolest thing you've ever thought of, and it can meet all of your requirements. But if it's too expensive, if it's too difficult to operate, if, for our case, if it takes up too much space, then it's not necessarily, it's not an appropriate technology. It's not really a frugal innovation either at that point, because it's not something that is intentional and practical, which I think are 2 key points to frugal innovation, to generally building appropriate technologies. So with the information that we had about what was currently happening, with the proposal, to an extent, we had an idea as to what we would need to meet that need in the market. But we essentially shed that last part of what we thought would be the right thing for the market. And we went out and we talked to over 250 stakeholders within the municipal wastewater treatment space. So this includes regulators, potential customers, so decision makers and operators within the wastewater treatment utility space. So this would be individuals who operate at Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District's treatment plants, the engineers at the sewage district, not just obviously in Milwaukee, but other combined sewer cities, as well as non-combined sewer cities, who ultimately still face these challenges because, again, of climate change and other concerns. So we went out and talked we talked to consultants, we talked to regulators, anybody who is in this ecosystem surrounding this problem. And a lot of this work was started with the Innovation Core program with the National Science Foundation. It's a great way to get scientists and those in the labs who are creating these new technologies to take the step back from what they think is the right technology, the right solution, the coolest thing you could ever think of, and actually understand, is it going to make sense in the market? And a lot of things that, again, we talked to so many different people. We've gone back and forth in this process either. So we develop a solution. When we hit this proof of concept for this 30-minute detention time, which is 20 times faster than conventional treatment, that's when I founded Rapid Radicals. That's when we realized, okay, we've got something as a baseline, but if we're really going to see if we can get this into the market in a cost-effective manner, we need to understand the scaling commercialization side of things as well. So as we understand how can we fit within the market, it becomes not just can we do it, but is it affordable? Is it adoptable? And what do we really need to understand? So we go through these iterations where if we have some aspect of our business model or our technology that says it's a little bit of a risky assumption. If we assume that this end of pipe treatment solution, this sort of distributed but decentralized wastewater treatment that I've been talking about, we assume that's the best model, we scale a whole business around it, and we get out into the industry, and individuals or customers, potential customers, say it's just too difficult to maintain remote treatment. We don't have any remote treatment currently in our sewer shed. Everything that we do for wastewater treatment is at our centralized plants. Then we realize that's not the right fit for this particular space. So maybe what we need is just to look at increasing capacity at the treatment plant, still doing it in a significantly less footprint, but providing them a solution that fits within their needs. So we've talked to all these people, we went through this iterative process with the technology, and ultimately we realized that there are these four main pain points that they have to deal with. There's the cost constraints, which makes a lot of sense. You've got to be cost competitive with existing types of treatment. Spatial constraints, I've mentioned a few times. Regulatory pressures, you can imagine. There are new regulations coming out because we're still learning about all these things that are in our wastewater that go into, that either can't be treated by conventional treatment plants, go into an open source or a reservoir, and then get treated again. We need to understand the fate of those different compounds. And as we develop new technology, we need to make sure we're developing technology that addresses the concerns of our customers from a regulatory perspective, as well as how do those regulations impact how our technology can be adopted. And then the most interesting one for us has always been this lack of operator ease of use. So that's been one more surprising feature where we understood after talking to a number of people that if operators find it challenging to operate a new technology, it's a difficult technology generally to get adopted because they're the ones with their hands on it. And so we shifted a lot of the work that we did to understand who is going to be operating this technology, what do the days look like, and how can we make their lives easier with a new technology instead of something new to learn about, harder to work with. So as we took in all those perspectives and we've iterated the technology over time, next slide, we went from, in this whole process in the lab, treating 14 milliliters of water in the Petri dish. This was at the beginning of my master's work. And then after I founded the company, scaled the technology the first time, we've since scaled it again. We're now operating a plant with a treatment capacity of 10,000 liters. And through that, we work with the National Science Foundation to get some funding through their Small Business Innovation Research Program. And we've taken the technology scaling piece as well as that market scaling piece. That's incredibly iterative. We build something, we operate it, we get feedback, we take that back to the lab or to the plant or to the pilot or to the way that we run our business or the technology. And we keep iterating on that to make sure that we're always meeting these goals and addressing these pain points. And it continues to be an iterative process. So that part is something I'm super passionate about because we've been kind of obsessed with it as a company. But briefly, I'll just talk about what the technology itself is, if there's any interest, and then leave a few minutes for questions. So we've got what we consider our core technology, which is ultimately the combination of a rapid solids removal system with an advanced oxidation system. And we use ozone as our ozone-based advanced oxidation system. And so within about 30 minutes of treatment, all happening within this 45-foot shipping container, we can remove a significant portion of organics, solids, and bacteria using E. coli as a marker for that. And you can see over there on that table, the treated water concentrations all meet permit for organics. It's again, that Clean Water Act discharge permit for organic solids and bacteria. And the organics and solids piece is really a key aspect of keeping keeping the ecosystem, the aquatic life, and the rivers, the integrity of our rivers and lakes up to par. And the bacteria part is obviously making sure that the water continues to be safe to interact with from a recreational perspective and then public health as well. And so we've built this technology, the combination of which is really key because if we can remove a lot of solids up front, then we can more cost effectively use an oxidation system that instead of using the oxidant that we create, that costs energy or uses energy to create, instead of using that to knock out those solids or remove the solids, we can do the solids portion cost effectively, and then we can then use the oxidation process to do soluble removal as well as disinfection, also cost effectively. So we developed a technology that is cost competitive with what's existing on the market, but 20 times faster and in a significantly smaller footprint, which again is what we learned our potential customers. Then as we move forward, we're looking at different ways to bring down this detention time even further and improve the type of technology or the type of contaminants that we can treat as those regulatory pressures increase. So we make sure that we're always, again, developing technology that's responsive to the market, to the regulatory scheme, to our customers, as well as it's practical, it's adaptable, it's cost effective. So I'm going to stop there. I think I have a couple minutes. If there's any questions, we can move through this to the end there. I ran over that a little bit, but I'm happy to take questions now or to leave some time at the end. A lot of stuff to try to cover.
Yeah, it's an interesting technology. Do you see this strictly in use with municipalities? Could you take it to disaster areas? Is this something that could happen in other locations? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so we're mostly looking at it from the municipal perspective because that's really the problem that we're seeking to solve. And we define the problem as who's spending money to solve it or who's spending currency. So we've been working with the municipal side for a long time. We also have a project launching in the UK because it's such a prevalent problem right now as well later this year. But the other industries that we're looking at include that disaster relief side of things. It's a containerized system. It's plug and play for both energy and water, influent and effluent. So you can put this thing on a truck, you can deliver it where it needs to be, you can hook it up, and within 10 minutes, you can be treating water to permit requirements wherever you are. There's also a value to it in industrial side based on the types of contaminants that you need to remove.
I wonder if you could say something about the willingness of municipal officials to try a new technology. These people are the stewards of our water and our water resources. And I don't know, and there's probably a lot of different solutions. There's we should be telling people not to use water during a storm. We should be telling people to sink it into the ground. We should be digging a bigger hole and putting more in the hole. And you see all these people talk. I imagine there's a whole grade of different feelings about what we should do, and how do you? Is there a willingness to innovate among these municipalities and these things that have enormous big budgets and a big responsibility to our healthcare?
It's a great question. It's a big piece of it's a huge piece as to why we've done so much customer discovery, because we still have to learn at the end of the day what drives adoption of these new technologies or what's influencing the risk aversion that we see. So the biggest part of it is that there is a regulatory side of it, and it is dealing with public health. And the other side of it is that in the wastewater space, we've been doing the same thing for a very long time. And there's been this perspective for a long time of like, we do this because it's what we've always done. And what we're starting to see is that there's a shift within the regulatory space to say, we can't keep applying 1980s solutions to 2050 problems. Everything has changed so much since the last regulation, even for combined sewer overflows, which was from 1994. So we have one regulation from 30 years ago that hasn't really been improved. And what we're trying to do on our end is demonstrate that provide the data to support the ability to innovate, because there's so many factors that go into it that I've mentioned already. So I think for some individuals within the industry or within the utility space, there are many that are very keen to innovate, and it looks like a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, it comes down a lot to how well we can adapt to the technology, to what their concerns are from a regulatory perspective, and fit within kind of what the budget looks like. So I think that the appetite could be bigger. but we also understand that there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And so we put the onus on us to say, let's collect that data, let's build that relationship, that partnership with the utility, collect that data, and work towards something that responds to those needs.
Does everybody get like climate change and more water?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Do you think these municipalities get that and want to, and are more makes them more eager to change?
I think the challenge that we're seeing is that climate change is causing more water. In some places, it's causing water scarcity, which drives a whole different challenge around water reuse. There's no decoupling anymore. So the short answer is yes. The longer piece to that, or the follow-up, is, but then what? Do we really have the tools to address it and to adapt? There's such an appetite to mitigate challenges with climate change, but the reality is when it comes to water, it has to be about adapting. If we look completely to mitigate, we're forgetting about the years and years of what we've already done in our existing infrastructure. So our perspective is, let's work with existing infrastructure and existing regulations to adapt what we're doing so that we can be more responsive to what we know is coming and what's truly already here.
Paige Peters, thanks a lot for joining us. That was really interesting, and good luck with your project. And thanks for hanging out with us in the evening there in the UK. And it sounds really interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing more about it.
Yeah, right on. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
We're going to swing over to the philanthropic realm now and talk with Elena Harkness. She's executive director for Current. It's a Chicago-based water innovation hub. And Elena leads a team that works to grow an inclusive blue economy, accelerate innovation, and solve pressing water challenges. Under her tenure, Current has helped attract more than 20 million in federal investments for water innovation to the region. It's launched the first real-time water quality monitoring tool for the Chicago River. It supported the commercialization of more than a dozen water startups. Before Current, she held several roles in the philanthropic world, managing director for economic development for RW Ventures. And she's also had a fellowship in urban governance at the Brookings Institution, led urban strategy development for the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and worked with the Chicago Community Trust as well. And thanks a lot for joining us, Elena, and explaining your role in water and clean water and good health in our society here.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Jerome, and also really wonderful to hear from Paige, who has become a collaborator.
We're affiliated with, yes.
Yes, yes. So it's just been wonderful tee up here to the presentation. Current we're a nonprofit, and so we are engaged in the philanthropic realm, but also with the public sector. And I'm really excited to share more about a very exciting initiative. And I think one of the ways that we fit into the theme of this conference around frugal innovation, we're really a small nonprofit. When I got to Current, we had 2 full-time employees, under $1 million budget. So we are a very lean kind of startup nonprofit organization that has managed to attract very significant federal investment recently. That's really bumped up that total of leverage we've been able to bring to the region for this work. And we've done it in partnership with folks like Paige and 50 plus others across our region. So I'm excited just to talk about the power of small and frugal to leverage much larger. So you can go ahead to the next slide, please. And thanks for teeing up what Current is, Jerome. So I think we can go past this pretty quickly. We have a 3-part mission. Yep, grow an inclusive blue economy and accelerate innovation, solve pressing water challenges. What does that mean? Go forward, please. Yeah, so we're supporting companies. We work with startups, companies like Paige's, Rapid Radicals, that are trying to address pressing water challenges. We're also really interested in creating jobs here in the Great Lakes region and building a pipeline of a workforce. Next slide. Everyone, I think, to Jerome's question about, are people connecting the idea of climate change to water challenges? I think more and more that's the case. When I came to Current 4.5 years ago, we were making the pitch that Chicago and the Great Lakes region really needed to be thinking about how we manage our water differently. not because we have an immediate pressing need to do that, although in some places that is very true. We already have water contamination issues that are disproportionately affecting some communities more than others. Same thing is true of urban flooding. But overall, we still have access to a large quantity of clean, safe drinking water, and that sets us apart globally in a time of increasing water scarcity. That conversation has really changed over the last 4.5 years. There's growing awareness about PFAS and other chemicals that are contaminating our water and are engaged in our wastewater too, microplastics as well. But there's also a growing sense that this water has opportunity for industry and for residents who may be thinking about a move. Can you go to the next slide, please? To our region. So this conversation around climate migration has really picked up in a very short amount of time. And I think as a region, it's on us, all of us as leaders, to be ready for that. Next slide. Great. So there's market opportunity here. Just in wastewater alone, so Paige was talking about the kind of context for her work, that's a $38 billion market globally, and that's just one piece when we think about the total market for water innovation. Next slide. So one of the first things that Current did, we did about 4 years ago, was really talk about what is the total size of that blue economy and what does it mean for this region. Next slide. So we drew a circle around that and we published a report that you're able to find on our website called Upstream Illinois, and it is all about building opportunity in the blue economy. It really draws a circle around our water, the actual Great Lakes water that we have here in the region, the inputs and suppliers that inform this middle water cluster, and the end users. And that could be utilities, it could be industry. In that middle, next slide, please. Oh, next slide. Thanks. In that middle water cluster, we've got technologies like Paige's, treatment technologies, monitoring and sensing, infrastructure, water saving, resource recovery, all sorts of different kinds of technologies that innovators are working to create and commercialize. And that's the market opportunity that we want to talk about when we say there's a blue economy here in the Great Lakes region and we need to nurture and grow it. Next slide, please. Great. So right now, we can say the blue economy is roughly a $16 billion enterprise that employs 1.5 million people across 75,000 firms. I think we're pretty confident that that's an underestimate. This is also data as of a couple of years ago. So it's something we want to track and update. Next slide, please. But we also know we have massive opportunity to build a much more inclusive blue economy than we already have. So if you think about the venture capital opportunity that's going to support these entrepreneurs, only 1% went to Black entrepreneurs in 2022. We have a long way to go to correct for that. That doesn't reflect the population of our region, and only 1.9% to women-founded startups like Paige's. So there's a huge need to diversify where our venture capital is going. Next slide. And we really need to do a much better job creating a workforce that is prepared to take advantage of all of this opportunity. 3.9% of registered apprentices are women in our Chicago region, 8% are African-American, only 6% of pipe fitters and plumbers apprentices are African-American. So we're starting to build partnerships to work on diversifying that pipeline. And it's really important because there's a lot of good paying jobs. There's a kind of aging workforce in the water sector by and large, and that is a really opportunity to train a future workforce that looks different. Next slide, please. Great. So our vision, and you can quickly scroll through this, is that every kid in our Great Lakes region gets to be born, gets to experience this wonder that we have in our backyard of the Great Lakes. And we talk about the splash to spark that puts this person on a career trajectory that maybe leads them to a path in STEM, maybe leads them to be an entrepreneur like Paige, maybe leads them to a job like mine, where you're actually the hub of a network of problem solvers who care about water, and your job is to kind of quarterback it all and move it forward. But either way, a lot of opportunity, and we've got a big vision to do that differently in the Great Lakes. Next slide. Great. So one of the ways we're working on this, we've got support from the Department of Commerce to build that Upstream Illinois blueprint that I talked about that sized the blue economy. And then we also got funding from Department of Commerce EDA to build a water technology accelerator to support companies like Paige's, to find them from all over our region and even beyond it, bring them here and help them grow. Next slide. We also have a massive scale-up opportunity in front of us because of another National Science Foundation program. You heard Paige talk about some of the NSF support that she's had for her work. And this is a major national competition called the Regional Innovation Engines. And just this year, we were announced as one of 10 inaugural engines across the country that have up to 10 years of runway to build regional innovation ecosystems. And ours, Great Lakes Renew, or the Great Lakes Water Innovation Engine, is all focused on water and wastewater and a more circular blue economy here in our region. Next slide. So our moonshot engine opportunity is actually to think about how we value our resources and our water differently. We want to recover and reclaim and reuse a lot of the things in our water and wastewater that right now we're sending downstream or just wasting. Things like energy that can be used to power the clean transition, nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that are limited in supply in the world, but really critical for things like fertilizer, critical minerals and materials that are really relevant to our sort of Midwestern vision of developing clean energy and clean EVs and vehicles here. And also those same technologies that actually can drive resource recovery are also useful for removing things that we don't want in our water, like PFAS and other forever chemicals. Next slide, please. So this is our region. What's mapped here is the Great Lakes watershed and the Illinois and Mississippi watersheds. Next slide. This is the 6 states that Renew's partners are drawn from. Next slide. And then our initial 2 years, so we have $15 million from the NSF right now to really get this engine off the ground. And our initial region of service encompasses these 3 states, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Ohio. Next slide. That's because there's a big market opportunity in these states. Again, collectively, there's these nascent regions of investment, and there's also really important engine building work. So you heard Paige talk about her partners and everything that's going on in Wisconsin. We also have a lot of really incredible partnerships in Ohio, the Cleveland Water Alliance. We have STEM and workforce partnerships there, a big Lake Erie test bed. So lots of exciting work and a massive opportunity to knit all of those leaders together into a vision that's greater than the sum of the parts. So next slide, please. Great. Collectively, this water cluster, you can see if you add it up, great to have 1 state, much better to have 3. Next slide. And we also have a really big opportunity to connect the investors, state and local government leadership. This is a bipartisan set of governors across these 3 states. They're all backing water innovation as a leadership priority. We have massive opportunity to connect a lot of research universities and labs. Just think about how much is scattered across that region, and we're working with many of them. And also just a bigger labor force, talent pools, training infrastructure. So great opportunity here to bring this vision to life across the region. Next slide. Yes, and together we have globally significant market drivers. I think this is one of the most important points. Alone, Chicago, even though it is a large region, when we think about the global opportunity for water innovation, and that's really what we're talking about here, the innovations that are going to be driven from the Great Lakes that are relevant to the world, each one of these states alone, when delegations come over from Singapore or from Europe, they're visiting all 3. They're going to Milwaukee, they're going to Cleveland, they're going to Chicago. They really see us as a region. And for the rest of the world that has, huge mega cities and mega regions, we need to just have more connectivity so our region stands together and feels less like 3, separate states with hard borders. Next slide. So we can quickly flip through these. I just want you to get a sense. These are the research partners that are engaged in Renew, universities and national labs, MSIs across the region. Here are some of the investor partners that are going to be critical to providing capital across from impact investing all the way through later stage investing. And some of these folks have very specialized understanding of what water entrepreneurs need to grow. Next slide. Utilities and test beds are so critical to this work because a lot of the time what companies like Paige's are looking for are opportunities to test and trial their work in the real world. And so all of these partners are providing places for us to do that. And we also, next slide, have industry partners that are doing the same thing. And this is really critical because these folks are driving demand not only for this work here in our freshwater economy in the Great Lakes, but also in the heavy water industry that they are engaged in elsewhere in the world. And again, just really want to drive home the point that this is a global market. Our workforce partners, we have national leaders here in the mix, some of them located in Chicago, but working elsewhere, others in Cleveland and in Wisconsin. WRTP, Big Step, our partners in Wisconsin are national leaders in workforce development, and we all have a lot to learn from and with each other in the next 10 years. Next slide. Great, so my main message here is that you can be a frugal innovator and a tiny team, and you can really deliver a lot of impact if you have this vision that you're going to collaborate to be globally competitive. So setting the big vision here, our partners together are going to really boost the region and make us a competitive global center for water-related innovation, connecting these already existing wonderful nodes of innovative opportunity across our region. And next slide. And drive this resource recovery revolution that is built in the Great Lakes, made for the world. So we have this vision of turning that waste in our water and wastewater into health and wealth for the people and places in our region who need it most. So I hope everyone here is excited about that vision, and we invite you to join and follow along. You can follow Current, you can follow Great Lakes Renew, and we will be really excited to share more as our engine gets up and running in the next 18 months here. So thanks, I'm happy to take some questions. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting, and like you're working with everybody who has a finger in the lake. What is this? Can you give us some examples of techniques and innovations that are applicable across the world that you're seeing? Are you seeing things that are happening here? We just saw rapid radicals. Are there other things that you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrific for everybody, not just people in the Great Lakes? And I mean, even your own organization seems like a innovative thing that could happen elsewhere in places.
Absolutely. And we do have partners that are just like us in other places. I mentioned the Cleveland Water Alliance, same kind of idea, hub structure. Because water is so complex and cuts through everything, you really do need this like multi-institutional partnership, and having a hub and a home for that is really important. In Milwaukee, there's the Water Council that's been doing this work. They've been leading that for more than 10 years. So same kind of idea, like we have to have this umbrella. So, and even I think, Paige, you said you're overseas. The Dutch Water Alliance in the Netherlands has a very similar structure. Singapore has another. So yes, it's a really interesting model, I think, for collaboration, and can be and has been replicated in other places. I think to your question about the innovations, almost anything we build here is going to be useful elsewhere. And I think one of the things I'd highlight, we have a really strong center in our region of creating the kinds of technologies that actually help water scarce places. Desalination, for example, like you're trying to get salt out of water because your only source, if you are in Israel or in Nevada, it might be, desalination and using seawater for drinking water. It's a super energy intensive process. So finding more efficient, especially energy efficient ways to do that effectively, that's critical. People don't think about that as a freshwater need, but we happen to have great scientists and researchers that understand the energy water nexus, that know how to build better and more efficient membranes. And that's really exciting, and we need to kind of lift that up. Those are technologies that are much more likely to be deployed elsewhere. PFAS, for example, we have a terrific team. There was just a great piece highlighting this work out of Northwestern, led by Will Dichtel. They are trialing their PFAS separation technology. So PFAS is this class of chemicals that we invented for beneficial reasons, because we wanted to have Gore-Tex boots and we wanted to have firefighting foam and things that are, very practical in application, but turn out to be destructive to human health and to environments, and very, very hard to get out of our water and wastewater. So there's a whole range of innovative solutions that are being trialed to actually find PFAS, get it out of the water, and then destroy it. And all of those three challenges are independently very difficult. But we have researchers here that are working on that and trying to figure out how to take those new membranes and new materials to scale. So that's really exciting. Sensors and AI, that's like a third area that I would highlight that is completely relevant, globally. Just we have really strong capabilities in computation. Our partners in Great Lakes Renew, their co-PI is the water lead for Argonne and the University of Chicago's Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering. We're leading the charge and really thinking about how sensors and artificial intelligence can help us identify and predict where contaminants are, and also how to just think about creating solutions that are more energy efficient. So almost everything we do here is applicable globally. And I think that's part of what's exciting about it.
I wonder if you could say something about the kind of thing that I think most people, when they hear about commercialization of the Great Lakes, they get scared and they say, you're going to take water out of the compact, you're going to put a straw to Arizona, you're going to take bottled water out, you're going to do all these things that are kind of that there's this negative side to commercialization.
Yeah.
And you don't seem to be working on any of that, but it's where is that? And how do you kind of work with people's heads on that?
Yeah, so we follow this closely. There are governance structures that govern how much water can come out of the Great Lakes, and we really, endorse and support the compact that protects the total sort of, withdrawals from the lake. That is a really, really, really important piece of the context for all of this. So I should say that's just a default for us. I think what we know is that there's going to be more pressure. We're not currently using all of what we could be from the lake, and that's maybe a good thing. We need to very carefully monitor how that's changing. I think our view is that demand for our water here in the Great Lakes will change, and we need to get ahead of the way that we are using our water currently, which is not the wisest and best use of every drop. It's just not. We're using drinking water for industrial purposes when we don't need to be. We are not doing water reuse in the way that we could be. There are states that have done this and figured this out because they have the demand drivers and they have scarcity. We need to do that before we have a scarcity problem. And so I think we have a two-pronged approach to this. One, ensure that we have good governance and strong protections so that everything that we do with our water here in the Great Lakes is long-term sustainable, but that we also start to act differently now and use our water that we are drawing and diverting from the lake much more responsibly than we currently are. We just can't afford to do it any other way. And once there's increased demand, I think the pressures will be very strong and it'll be, somewhat too late. We need to get ahead of it now. And that can be a difficult message to deliver, but it's, I think if you look at how quickly the conversation has changed just in a place like Arizona, where, it used to be build, 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 and now they've got growth boundary limits because they can't prove that they'll have the future guarantee of drinking water that they need. And that's, those are game-changing conversations. So I think we need to get ahead of that and start to act more responsibly with the water we have.
There was, you had some really interesting slides about the workforce, and I wonder if you could say a little more about workforce development. There was a question. One of the people here worked on the Future Energy Jobs Act in Illinois,
Yes,
and
yeah.
would kind of institutionalize work programs. Is there something similar for the Great Lakes? A kind of a diversification of the workforce idea.
It's such a great question. There isn't, there needs to be, and that's what we're working on. So in the Great Lakes Renew framework, our entire workforce platform said, we've got to do this. We've got to build a K to Gray vision of how we get everybody involved in thinking about how they could work in and around water in the Great Lakes. It's a huge opportunity. The energy, CEJA and the Clean Energy Jobs Act in Illinois really put energy transition jobs front and center, and that is super important. We have a massive opportunity to build on that. And I've just recently joined the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board to help think about how can we integrate this idea of water jobs and all of the jobs that are going to flow from investment in things like lead service line replacement, right? There's money for infrastructure that is related to this kind of broad blue jobs, blue economy frame, but we haven't named it and we haven't funded it and we haven't really put it on the map in the way that we need to have it be a regional priority. And so that's part of what we're doing with Great Lakes Renew is, rallying the partners across all these states, because there's no reason we need to do that, state by state or municipality by municipality. We all need it. We all have the same problems with an aging workforce, a workforce that lacks diversity, and we can all start to do something about that together.
Is there any underrated issue around the Great Lakes that you would like to raise up? When you try to enlighten people about what's going on in the Great Lakes, is there any big, I think nitrogen is an enormous one that people, normally don't talk about. And for Chicago, we dump most of it into the Gulf of Mexico, but the Lake Erie, all the others, huge nitrogen problems. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, this resource recovery frame, this kind of circular water, like how we could think about getting really valuable things out of our wastewater, I think can help change the conversation about even calling it wastewater. That's really not on radar for people. Like the idea that we could extract the kinds of materials that are actually going to feed the supply chain for the batteries that we need to produce to power our electric vehicles, I think that's really not, that's just not on radar for most people. And it really is such a powerful illustration of how water and energy are just inextricably linked, and how our clean energy future and the sort of climate transition that we need relies on water, and how we use our water and wastewater. And that to me is like what's so powerful about and compelling about this kind of Great Lakes Renew vision. We have the science, we have the scientists, you know, and we have the innovators that really want to think about how we bring these technologies to market, and we have industry that needs it, and we have the talent to power the workforce that will support it. And I think we just need to keep that vision front and center and start to line up all of our, you know, political leaders and investors behind it. And, you know, there's a lot of work to do, but I think it's an exciting vision. So that's what I'd end on.
Elena Harkness is Executive Director of Current, and it's a Chicago-based water innovation hub. And congratulations on your great work. Keep up the great work, and we'll hear lots more from you, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, Jerome. Great to talk with you. Great to be with everyone today.
Hey, Jerome, I think you're muted.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, we had Elena Harkness there, and Executive Director for Current. Very exciting. And Shilpa Alva is our next featured person. She is in Mumbai, joining us globally. Thanks for staying up with us. And Shilpa Alva is the founder and executive director of Surge for Water. It's a nonprofit dedicated to addressing the cycle of poverty through access to safe water and sanitation solutions. Since its founding 15 years ago, Surge has impacted over 1 million lives in 12 countries. Shilpa's journey didn't start in the international nonprofit world. After graduating from Johns Hopkins University with a chemical engineering degree, she joined the corporate world and earned an MBA from the Carlson School of the University of Minnesota. After a successful corporate career, she made the bold decision to make a break and start Surge for Water. And we're anxious to hear about the work of Surge for Water. Thanks for joining us, Shilpa.
Thanks, Jerome, and I'm glad to be here. Just to clarify, I'm in Dubai, not Mumbai, because I always get asked whether we do work in India, and we're not currently working there. So different country, but
sorry about that.
No problem. Still happy to be here. And yeah, if you could just go directly to the next slide. Allison earlier in this talk, in this presentation today, shared, you know, some of the statistics about the global water crisis. And yeah, these, you know, there are billions of people right now that lack access to life's most basic needs. And I'm here to talk about Surge's ways that we work on water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health, all preventable parts of this holistic global water crisis. You know, when we talk about the theme of this conference, Elena mentioned, you know, she talked about the size of Current initially. Surge is a small nonprofit, but there's a lot of amazing work that you can do, that we are doing with low budgets and just using technologies that exist in, especially in rural areas that have high impact. The next slide, please. So yeah, since the start of Surge, we have worked in 12 countries, as was mentioned by Jerome, but a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I would say, we, you know, took a hard look at like our values and the way we work and just like how we're, how we operate. And we decided to focus on 4 places: Indonesia, Uganda, Haiti, and the Philippines. Most of our work is currently occurring in Uganda. But yeah, we're actively growing in Indonesia as well. And something that I'm going to talk about today is that, you know, when we talk about innovation, of course, technology is really important. But especially in this frugal innovation space, there's a lot that you can do in terms of process, like how is the work actually being done? And for Surge, it's been really important to us to like really evaluate, like, when you're looking at rural solutions, simple things like boreholes and, you know, drainable latrines and just technologies that have been around for a long time, like people wouldn't think of them as innovative, especially right now with so many advances in technology, we really look at the process of like, why are more than half the wells in the world broken down? Like what's behind that? Who was involved? Like what organizations, what went wrong, and what can we do differently? We also look at like the aid structure in general, right? Like global development and global aid, and what does that mean? And what's our role in it? And from a process perspective, Surge is very focused or highly focused on decolonization and what our role is in breaking down the power structures that are associated with the global aid world, and just making sure that everything that we do decentralizes that power and moves the decision making to the communities. So really our role is to empower, enable local leaders to deliver their own solutions for their communities. And so what this means is, local jobs, local purchasing, and sometimes that limits the kinds of technologies that we can bring into a place, because we really focus on the model and the process as part of the way we approach innovation. Because we really want to see that, if there's a solution that's was it technologically sustainable, culturally, socially, economically, and that puts a lot of limitations on the kinds of things that we work on. Next slide, please. This is something, one of the focuses of what I'm going to share today is really about, women and water and what that looks like. And I love sharing this image because it was taken on these 3 pictures, which were taken on the same day in Uganda, one of the times I was visiting our community partners. And I think it's quite powerful because we talk about like the global water crisis and 2 billion people, right, that don't have water, 4 billion without sanitation. And then you see this cycle of poverty that doesn't, the cycle of oppression, the cycle of poverty that continues. So here you have a young girl leaving school or not going home to study, like not playing, doing the things that someone her age should be doing. She's collecting water for her family. And then the second picture, you have a young mother, baby in tow, doing the same thing. And then, you think that by the time you're in your 70s, that maybe you're done, like your job of collecting water is done, and maybe the younger ones are doing it, but that is not the case. The job is still needed because the water source is still very likely in many parts of the world, several kilometers away from your house. And it's all hands on deck. And typically, when I say all hands on deck, it's all women's hands and children. Men do help, but it's typically predominantly the woman's role to collect water for their family's survival. And Surge exists to stop this. Like, we don't want to see any of these women at any stages of their life doing this, because when you still have, in this day and age, when we talk about all this amazing technology and the stuff like that Current's working on and all this incredible innovation that's happening, it's really oppression, right? Like when people are still walking to water sources, long distances, and very often collecting water that is unsafe to consume. To the next slide, please. This brings us to Surge's woman-centered model. So while women are responsible, have the primary responsibility of collecting water for their family's survival, they are usually the least involved in the decision making and in the leadership roles. I mentioned that most of our work was in Uganda, and in Uganda specifically, there's a lot of the land ownership and like the rights are owned by the men, and that limits a lot of what decisions the women can make in society. And we have, we are approaching our work is making that extra effort to ensure that the woman's voice is not only heard, but that she is really centered in the solution. And we have found, like, from just like studying why other situations have failed, or like why so much, all these wells are being drilled all over the world, and like the stories of them failing, a lot of times, the women weren't like consulted in terms of where the water source should be. They weren't involved in the maintenance of it. They weren't trained. Like, so there was like just a lot of trends that we found that did not involve the people, the main customers, right? The true program participants were not involved in the actual solution and the implementation of the solution. So next slide, please. This is how we do things a little bit differently. We make sure that every part of our every part of our solution, like the way we work, the women are involved. So this includes the country directors, the program officers, construction workers. That's rare. I will have to say I probably have only seen a couple over the time that we've been doing this work, but they're welcome in our space. We also work with local entrepreneurs. So the image, the first image on the bottom line is entrepreneurial woman in Uganda, and she has created her own water delivery business because she has a bicycle, and a lot of people, because they're out farming, they have other work, may not have the ability to go to the water source. So started her own business. There's also the water user committees there. So we always get asked, right? Yeah, you deliver these solutions, we're building these wells and toilets, and how do you ensure that they last? And the biggest way that we approach this is that every solution globally, wherever we're doing this work, has a strong, well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, it's led by the community, right? It's locals delivering their own solutions, deciding on the technologies. Even the technologies that we use are locally sourced, but if it's an imported technology, we're buying it from local vendors. It's really important for the way we work. But then in the actual implementation, when we look at the steps that go into our solutions, prior to starting the work, the very first step would be the community mobilization. Well, actually, it would be the needs assessment. And once we've done the needs and capacity assessment, we would mobilize the community. And so in the needs assessment, capacity assessment, and in mobilizing the community, we make sure that we're speaking to the women, even in really patriarchal societies. Like, I just left Uganda to come to, Indonesia to come to Dubai, and it's working in these communities where only the men show up at the community meetings to discuss the water source. And it's taken a long time for us to really find culturally and socially acceptable ways to get the conversations with the women. And that includes us having women on our team, because then it becomes much more comfortable. So going back to that water user committee picture, we make sure that once we're done with the mobilization of the community and we're starting to build the solution, that there's a committee formed that's locally elected. They are involved in the, mobilizing the community to bring the materials, but also in the construction process with overseeing how the work is being done. And then they go through a pretty rigorous training that teaches them about the maintenance and the care of not only their water sources, but also sort of the overall sanitation and hygiene that's associated with that source. And that's really important because that allows for the longevity, and it's also something that we track in the ongoing monitoring and evaluation of our programs. But also what's unique is that we make sure that there's a lot of women that are in those committees, because then they can represent the community at large that is walking to that water source to collect the water for their family. Community elders, village elders, the grandmothers in the village, wherever we work, just have so much wisdom, and they really understand, the things that we can do. We're working in really rural, remote areas where no other international NGOs are working on WASH. That's another distinguishing factor of where we work. And so when we go into these remote rural areas, there's just a lot of cultural and social norms that we have to understand and tread really lightly, because there could be belief systems associated with a spring that we're trying to protect. And we've seen these things happen. And it's really important for us to understand from the elders what that situation looks like, so that we're being really respectful with the, with how we deliver those solutions. And then, if you look at our website and you look at our team, you're going to see, again, just a lot of women leading our organization. And as I say this, even though this is a women-centered talk, really the reason we're doing this is we're focusing on women leading the way and centering it to provide water for the entire community. So the goal is that every single person, man, woman, child, has access to water. We're just doing it through the lens of the person who is predominantly responsible for collecting water for their family's survival. Next slide, please. And so just want to talk a little bit about the solutions that we work on. So, we work holistically on water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health, as I mentioned. In the water space, we are drilling and fixing wells. We are building rainwater harvesting systems. We're working with filtration systems. We're protecting springs. And the solution and the technology that we implement really depends on the situation that the country or the community is going through and what's happening with technology in that area. So in Indonesia, as I mentioned, I was just there yesterday. In the communities that we work in there, we're seeing a lot of the effects of climate change. So there's no water in the mountainous areas, and the cost to get water from underground rivers and from wells is just beyond what we can afford at this point. And a lot of the big industrial systems that the government has put in, the people weren't trained on how to use it, and a lot of them have failed and have broken down, and there aren't ways to fix it. So the technology that seems to be working there for us right now is something as simple as rainwater harvesting, building huge community systems to collect water, smaller systems for schools, because while there isn't much groundwater, there is rainfall at certain times of the year. So we're trying to work with that to save enough water when it does rain so they can get communities through the dry seasons. The harvesting of springs, trying to go a little bit deeper in the springs to get the water out and increase that flow rate if possible. In Uganda, the picture you see there is of a well we would have drilled. And the government now in Uganda, it's really focusing on upgrading these hand pump wells to solar powered systems, which makes complete sense, right? Pumping a well, is a lot of work, even though it's one of the most common solutions that's still out there. It's very low cost, and it can get water to a lot of people. But the government really wants to move towards these solar pumps so that people are not pumping anymore, and you can pipe and you can get water closer to homes. We're far away from having from the government perspective, but even organizations to be able to do that and still serve everybody. But what we're doing in response to that is we're making sure that the pipes that we use, we're actually just in the process of shifting this, that the pipes that we use even in these hand pump wells are upgradable, so that when we're ready for solar, whether it's the government, whether it's us, whether it's another organization, they can just take off the some of the hardware and replace it with the solar technology. So really trying to prepare ourselves for the changes, which is very exciting that is coming. And we are seeing that in the time we've been working, that more and more advances in technology are reaching some of the most rural and remote areas. Also, when we talk about the water sources, we do work with sensors. We're actually in a partnership right now with Charity Water, and they're beta testing these remote sensors. So we're in the beta test with them, and we have sensors on 30 wells in Uganda right now. And we can, on my computer, I can log in right now and I can see the last time someone pumped water, whether it's, it's not being used, the liters of water that they've consumed, the hours per day. And this is really cool because we're working in really vast areas where there aren't proper roads to get to places. And it's, as we grow and we have more impact with the solutions, it's hard for us to continuously monitor them. So being able to do this from our computers, our local team can look at any point and see if there's an issue, that really helps with providing the service or working with the community so they can fix any issue as soon as it happens. So we're very excited about that advancement. Moving on, so I mentioned, to the next slide, please, that we work on holistic solutions. Something else that we work on are toilets, primarily in schools and healthcare facilities. And yeah, this picture here is actually first of a kind in this rural remote area. It's an advance in the technologies they have, because it's a drainable latrine that has an incinerator. This is a girls' toilet, so it has incinerator for menstrual pads. It has a changing room, and it even has rainwater harvesting collection, so for washing hands and for just practicing good sanitation hygiene. And this is replacing basically just what happens is, unfortunately, in the two districts we're working in, Uganda and Kabarmite and Kalaki, that's the most prevalent form of toilets. And so when they're full, they collapse, and then you just build another one. So these are, can be used to remove the feces, and it separates the urine. And we've even built some versions for teachers that are called eco-sanitaries. So it creates a closed loop with the water and agriculture, with sanitation and agriculture, which is really cool in a in an area that is, with the product, 70%, actually 90% of the income is farming. Next slide. As part of our holistic model, we also work on soap making because 2 to 3 billion people in the world lack access to hygiene, and soap is one of the most essential tools or resources to stopping the spread of germs, yet it is a luxury for so many around the world. And again, it is something where, with a mother taking care of a newborn, taking care of her children, not having soap to wash clothes, to wash the house, to clean things in the house, to clean dishes, soap to bathe in, like just basic things that are necessary for, healthy living and survival, does not exist or exists in a very expensive way. We have beautiful partnerships actually with corporations based in the US that fund soap making, which then allows people to continue the production of it, right? We don't give away anything. Our model is quite sustainable from the standpoint of we're not handing out bars of soap, we're not handing out bottles of liquid soap, but we are working with the communities to educate. And this was actually a training at a local market. So their vendors, they're going to be able to then sell the soap in their communities. And then from our local partnership perspective, our local partner has the raw materials, we buy them in bulk, and that's another revenue stream that has gone on to do so much more work in this space. So a very cool model we've had. And we focus on single mothers. And so in Haiti, for example, last year, we had over 50 single mothers who were able to create their own entrepreneurial businesses with making and selling soap and doing quite well at it. And then the last, or almost last slide is, when you're talking about lack of products, and holistic solutions that are women-centered, we noticed that a lot of our girls drop out of school at the adolescent age, like 13, 14, and something as basic as not having products. And based on where we're working, the menstrual cup is a great solution if you have water and if you have a way to boil and clean it. But we have found that teaching how to make reusable pads from local materials has been incredibly effective. So now a girl can go to school, have a water source at the schoolyard, have the water filtered, have a gender-friendly toilet, have soap and a menstrual product. So this holistic way of like promoting good health and for the well-being of an entire community, starting with the girl child. And next slide, please. So since the last 15 years, we've impacted over 1 million people. And what does this mean, right? Like when we talk about water access, you talk about billions of people not having it, like what happens once you have water in these rural, remote areas? It's life-changing, right? You have access to dignity and joy, and then more tangible things like improvements in education and health and well-being and income. We just have countless of stories and data that show that the minute we provide a water source, and actually the World Bank has this number that every dollar invested in holistic wash solutions is a $21 return on investment for that community, and we see that. And the last slide, I think, is my last one. Yep, that's just us. That's I'm in the red skirt there. This was taken last year with our team in Uganda, and that's all I have. Feel free to look up our website, follow us on social media, contact me for more questions, and happy to hand it back over to Jerome.
Hey, Shilpa, we'll do some questions, and Paige will join us here in a second. But I want to ask a couple questions specifically about Search for Water and the work you're doing. We had a session yesterday where we had an anthropologist on who was really collecting data and working with stakeholders to change practices that are harmful for water and health. And we had another person on who had a technological innovation, a kind of a well water saving thing, and she was really leaning into that as a way to change people's minds. And the anthropologist would love to have a technical fix, and the person who had the technology would love to have kind of a more anthropological conversation in the communities she works in, wants to inspire those kind of things. How do you balance those things? And because you're doing those, you've got a lot of those balances too here. How do you have a preferred method of working? Do you go in and try to get kind of acclimate yourself to the community and the stakeholders and conversations, or do you kind of come in and say, hey, I think you're going to really need this kind of bathroom?
Yeah, so everything that we do is led by the community. So when we say that, it's our local partners are from the community. They were born there, they grew up there, they know everything. And what we tend to identify, the way we work is we identify the leaders who are deeply respected. So they know everything. They know the other leaders, they know how to activate the community. And so when it comes down to implementing a solution, they're already respected. And then they go in and they're having the conversation. It's not me. When I'm going in there, or our team based out of Chicago or Dubai, when we go in, we're just visiting and like auditing and like, just providing the support and learning and having discussions on a strategic management sort of level. But from an actual implementation standpoint, I would say that the anthropological focus is probably the biggest focus. We're not trained anthropologists. However, our leaders who are delivering the solutions are from those communities, right? They understand the nuances and cultural and social, political. Like I didn't have time to talk about the political situation. So all of that is considered. So we never come in and force a solution. But now if there's a technology, because people come to us all the time because they want to field test a technology, and we are always open to it. But when that happens, the first thing that we do is that we take the technology to our local teams and we ask them for their opinion. If they are willing to try it, then they go, like we're just doing this in Indonesia right now, something like the menstrual cup. We're going to the midwives. So we had a meeting with the midwives and we're like, what do you think? And the midwives are like, actually, like, we think we could make this work. We're like, okay, so we're going through the right channels, like local midwives, a local, remote island, Sumba, Indonesia. And they're the ones introducing it. So we really look for the leaders within the community to influence that change, but don't force it. If the community says they don't want it, we don't do it.
And so when it comes to like focusing your work in less countries, you indicated you were focusing your work. Is this kind of is that a result of you've been working with so many community leaders throughout the world, you could kind of narrow the batch a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of it. And it's just we wanted resources to go deeper instead of wider. And we made a switch. So when I mentioned the less countries, the other thing is we made an intentional switch to do holistic solutions. So instead of just doing water everywhere, we realized that when you really want to like sort of change the health status, you need soap, you need the menstrual pads, you need the toilets, right? Because if people are still openly defecating by a spring, it's not gonna solve anything. And if you go to a toilet and you don't have a way to wash your hands with soap, illnesses, diarrheal deaths are still going to happen in children, especially for children under 5. So once we realized that, it took us a moment, but then we started doing the holistic solutions. And of course, we also started evaluating the kinds of partners we worked with, and just we were working, let's just say, with foreign leaders in other countries, and we decided we don't want to do that anymore for the reasons I just mentioned, with making sure that the solutions are driven by locals. So that was an easy way to be like, okay, those are not situations we want to be in anymore. So now the 4 countries we're in, even within those countries, multiple communities, we get really, really micro local into like how we deliver solutions. It was all quite intentional to fit the model that we have today.
Paige Peters is still with us, and Paige Peters is the founder and CEO of Rapid Radicals Technology, and did the presentation earlier on kind of treating our wastewater treatment in the Great Lakes and the Milwaukee area. And I was asking her about the whole issue of changing people. Are municipalities open to change? Are people who are entrusted with water care open to change? I imagine you face the same thing on a granular level. There are people who are the caretakers of the water, and they do the things the same way they've done them all the time. Even and do they want to change? Do they recognize changes in their circumstance and climate and other things that are happening that are impacting their water sources? Do you find that there is more openness to change these days?
Oh, sorry, that was for me.
Sure.
I would, yes. So the openness to change has to do with the need, right? Because, when you don't have water and you don't have toilets, like you're willing to do a lot of, different things to have that, to make that happen. But I think a lot of it, the whole behavioral change process, is really built into how we work, like where this whole model of like working on hygiene and menstrual health. Like we have a team of educators that are out there in the schools and communities every single day educating the children, and that's how we start the process, right? And then you start working to the different levels of community. So we built in sort of this strengthening the relationship with the community, so that when we're coming in with a new process, with a new model, the community trusts us. So like we've built the trust because of all the different layers of work that we've done. We definitely get resistance. We have been in situations that we've not been able to rehabilitate springs or do certain things because they've believed that it's sacred, and if we touch it, like there could be, curses to the community, right? And certain belief systems. We have to tread really lightly on that. So yeah, it's constant battle between a balance that we have to make, because we always want to respect the local regulations and the norms. However, I would say for the bigger part of it, because it's such a, it's life's most basic needs that we're talking about, that people are very willing to be open to like new ways of, and actually if you present it like, first in the district, first in like the region, like that's going to have the solution, like they're so proud of it, right? And also the way we work, we're not just delivering the solution. The locals, there's cost sharing in everything we do. So there's a co-payment. So they're coming in, they're doing we do toilets, they're excavating, they're building the fences around the wells. So they feel so much pride in these solutions and ownership in it, that, and then if it's a newer technology, then they're like, when they speak about it, they're so proud of it. And it's really cool because then that's contagious. So we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And people can submit their questions in the chat now, and we'll ask a few questions before we go. And Paige, I imagine some of that actually really, I see you nodding your head to some of that, and it applies, and even though you're in very different circumstances, that's the same thing's true. If you can get somebody to buy into your new technology and be proud of it, that's a big win.
Yeah, like the best, this is true for so many things, but really the best endorsement is just a happy customer, right? But the challenge I think we see in the utility space, especially utilities that are larger ones that we're working with, nobody necessarily wants to be the first. So we struggle with that. There's a lot of pride in having and being an innovator, which is fantastic, but there's a huge challenge in going from innovation to a capital asset, where I think there's a lot of great feeling and great enthusiasm and energy around for some of these larger utilities to adopt or to bring on an innovation project. But from our perspective, there's also the challenge to say, well, but is it going to convert to a sale? Like, we're still a business, so we still have to get to that next step. So we have a lot of great relationships, like our partnership with Milwaukee Metropolitan Storage District right now, doing these pilot studies has been fantastic and has given us a great baseline, but we can't pilot forever. So there's always that balance to say, now when does our next pilot project, or when does the innovation, the energy around innovation, shift to actually making capital investments, not just for the companies like us to stay alive and stay innovating, but also to demonstrate that we're willing to put their capital budgets where their goals are, to make long-term investments, not 1 or 2 year projects. So I think we see a little difference. Like, everyone's happy to be the second, but we see a lot of hesitation to be the first.
A question came in for Shilpa. What are the technologies that you use for cleaner water? And are the water filters available to people at a low cost?
Yes, absolutely. So we work with locally produced water filters in the Philippines, actually all the countries, Philippines, Uganda, Haiti, and Indonesia. In 3 of those countries, we use clay, simple clay filters. They're either candles or also clay or ceramic, or pots, depending, different technologies in different countries. And yeah, we actually have an interesting model with that. For the household perspective, they actually have to be purchased. In Uganda and in Haiti, we've done that model. Actually, we did that in the Dominican Republic too, and it ended up being sustainable that we could exit for that reason. So people were buying it. A lot of times they were buying it at a microfinance. It's the filter would be like between $20 to $35, which is a lot of money for rural areas. But if you have a payment plan, it works. And then a lot of times what you do is like there are women co-ops that are formed. So we work with the co-ops, and then the co-op will save money and they'll buy one home a filter. and they'll save money and they'll buy the second home filter. So we found within the places we work in the right systems or the right groups. So we always work within the social fabric that already exists instead of creating it ourselves. And that has, got household filters to thousands and thousands of families, tens of thousands, I would say. And then at a larger scale, we work with like biosand and carbon and like higher things like that. But again, very simple things, all produced locally. In the Philippines, we do larger systems. In Haiti, we've done larger systems as well. So again, really depends on the need from that community. But everything that we do is quite low cost because we are a small yet growing organization. So we always look for the most effective local solutions for solving the issue.
I imagine both of you are involved in like selling an outcome at some point. You're going to have to tell people here, if you've got this problem, I've got this thing, and here is the outcome. You are going to get a good outcome here. Is that a crucial moment when do people want the outcome that you're selling bad enough? Can you make them want that thing clean? I can clean your wastewater. Do they want the outcome? Can you sell it with data, or how do you reach that moment where you can change a person and make them, yeah, I can see the innovation that I can see the results that this can help me. This can help our community.
Is that for me?
Paige, yeah, both of you, Paige and
Yeah,
Shilpa.
sure. So I mentioned before, the key part for us is showing the data. Kind of the onus is on the innovator in the company to demonstrate that we can meet and we can build the performance metrics around what we know they need to see to adapt. The challenge that we often see, especially within wet weather, is that when you get these overflow events happening, there are millions of gallons of water per day. The flow rate is immense. The water comes really fast, and it's quite unpredictable. So we developed a system that can start up really quickly, but to scale it to a point where we know that it is truly scalable to that order of magnitude, we still are one order of magnitude below that with our current pilot projects. But for a small company like ours, we're a 3-person team. To build that capital, to build a 1 million gallon per day system, ours is currently 0.1 million gallons per day, is still a huge capital feat. And so to get to the point where we've been told by people, if you can build and prove that you can do this at 1 million gallon per day system, we're in. But for us to get to that point, it's a huge capital investment. So that's where we're looking to build partnerships with utilities who want to build this solution, want to integrate this into their existing infrastructure, to help us get to that point to prove it all together. So for them, it's a point of getting to the right scale, which is huge for these large utilities. But it's not always just about cost. The biggest challenge that these utilities face is if they keep violating their permits, their Clean Water Act permits with overflows, that it's not as much about fines and fees as it is about losing autonomy. At that point, there's a federally mandated plan that goes in place. It's going to be billions of dollars over 20 years where you're forced to go into these projects. So for us, we measure it less on fines and fees return on investment and more about retaining your autonomy and being able to be responsive to your own ratepayers and what you need in your community. So it's almost the provision, not just of avoidance of fines and fees, but of retaining that autonomy. That's part of the product sell, essentially, in the outcome.
That's an interesting motivating factor. I imagine it's a little different for you, Shilpa, but I imagine you get to that same point too, where you're like trying to put something into a community.
I would say again, because there's honestly more of a desperation and a need is so great. We don't have many challenges from a community perspective, because you just think about what we're doing, right? It's just so desperately needed, and it's needed for survival. The sale that I go through, the convincing I go through is on the other side, on the funding side, right? It's the pitch to, well, the individuals, you can pull at the heartstrings, because I mean, anybody on this call can understand, right? Like you need water to live. Like that's quite simple, and we can connect. But a lot of times, because we're working with a lot of companies, and that's actually our focus area, to have corporate partnerships. And yeah, that's always interesting, because what's the when you have an investment, right? And there's an ROI. and the ROI is money, it's very easy. But when the ROI is like, yeah, you've helped change the world and making the world a better place and so you're a better person, it's hard for a company, right? So we have to really be, be thinking about right now, like we look for metrics that match like ESG reporting, right? Because that's really important. Or we're looking at like, like the business case for WASH, like a lot of companies have been doing, especially looking at supply chains, right? If you have a supply chain that's in any of the countries we're working on, like how does that play into it? Employee engagement is huge, right? Opportunities for employees to be part of our board, to volunteer, to attend our events, for me to come speak, right? So the sell is different. It's on the side of generating the money. And that's the trickier side. The use case is much easier because of what we do and how we do it.
All right, we're running just a pinch over, but there's one more question we'll squeeze in. There's lots of flood-related diseases in developing countries. This is a question for Paige. Where is if there's no safe drinking water available in all these flooding places, not a drop to drink with water everywhere, do you see your innovation helping those people? Could that be something that would work in disaster relief, to have access to safe water in a short time frame?
Yeah, we're working with, currently we have a project going on with the Army Corps of Engineers in the US to develop a potable water reuse process, with the first two parts of it, essentially the upfront treatment part of it being ours, where we just add one more treatment process onto it. And we've provided the barriers, the double barriers that you need for reuse, and potentially one more for potable direct reuse. So it's possible. There is, it's, when we look at it as an appropriate technology in certain places, there's still an energy requirement. And so there's still this need for there to be connection to a power source. So it might not be applicable everywhere, but everything that we're doing is working to make it more energy efficient and for the purposes of a smaller community or a smaller need. And especially if the water is not necessarily wastewater. So this reuse project is literally wastewater to drinking water within a 45-foot shipping container. But if it's flood waters, if it's more dilute, there's definitely possibilities there. The energy requirement, I think, still could be something that's, it's not a high energy requirement, it's just that there is one, versus, disinfection with chlorine or something. So it's a dream of mine. When we think about when you build a company and you develop a technology, the dream for me is to see this technology deployed all over the world and find different versions of it that are appropriate in different places where it's needed. And so I'd hope that we could get to that point someday, knowing that there is a need out there that perhaps we could have a solution that will meet it.
Paige Peters is founder and CTO of Rapid Radicals Technology. We will look forward to seeing more about Rapid Radicals technology in the future, and I hope you can scale it all up and clean up our water and wastewater. That'd be a great thing. And Shilpa Alva is founder and executive director of Surge for Water, joining us from Dubai. And it was great to talk with you and get to know some of those solutions you're working on, the kind of holistic solutions that are working for you, and creating better healthcare for people all over the place. That's awesome. And Elena Harkness, executive director for Current, had to run, but it was fun talking with her too. And I can see exactly why she is the innovation hub director, connecting people, because she's got a lot of energy on that front. And thanks to everybody for having another wonderful Frugal Innovations 2024 conference. I really enjoy collaborating every year, and Allison is here and with us. And thanks a lot, Allison, and good to talk with you, and good to talk with everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. I put it in the chat to our speakers, and Jerome, for you, as always, fantastic moderation again. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.